Hi. In our previous lecture, we looked at how to separate our templates into partials so that we don't have to repeat ourselves when we are creating code. In this next set of lectures, I want to chat about how to make our entire blog a little bit more WordPressy or bloggy. Some concepts that I would like to discuss include categorization, uh, implementing a basic menu system, as well as pagination. Now, the first one of these three that I would like to talk about is pagination. So, pagination is usually a very underrated aspect of a website that has got multiple posts in an archive, but is still a very important part. So, fortunately for us, Django has got a great built-in pagination system, which we can pull into our view and which we would want to use in our home view. So the first thing that I want to do, and something that has been irritating me for a bit, is just to clean up our view a little bit so that when we load our home page, our home page doesn't have to have that username parameter attached to it. So we can just pull in blog.home, and then within our views here, we can now remove this username parameter. We can delete it from here. And although it is great to have a context variable, I'm going to show you how to pass this post variable straight into our render function. Then the next thing that we just need to make sure that we do is to remove the current user. So I'm just going to put home into here so that we know that it is on the home page. And if we had to now go to our base root of our site, we would now see home. Great, and this is exactly what we want. This is looking a lot cleaner than it did before. Cool. Maybe just add an HR tag here as well. And now we can see already it is looking a lot better. So within the context of pagination, oh yes, I was also going to show you how to remove the context variable here. So all this is at the end of the day is it's actually an example of a dictionary, but I'm using the words dictionary, lists, and arrays interchangeably. The main difference between a dictionary and a list is the key pair system and the fact that in a list you would use square brackets, whereas within a dictionary you use curly braces. This is not really too important. So really what we can do is we can just copy this, and instead of calling our context variable, we can just open and close our curly braces and pass the dictionary straight into our render function. So really we can just do it like this, and if we refresh our front page, you'll notice that it all still works. So that's great. So we don't really need our context variable, but it does help just to, if we have a lot of variables, to pass it in at this point as opposed to passing in a whole lot of variables uh, into our return function. So we don't really have a lot here, so we can do it like this. So the first thing that I want to discuss is how to pull in Django's pagination library into this file. So the way that we're going to do that is how we have always imported libraries. We say from, and this is a Django core library. So Django.core, and then the library that we're looking for is the paginator library. So that's paginator. Great, and then we are going to import the paginator class from within that library. And because it is a class, it needs to be a capital letter, as it has been with importing classes in the past. So now we have access to this paginator class, and we can create an instance of the paginator class, and that is exactly what we are going to do. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to change the name of this posts object here, because when we return the posts to the template or through the view, we don't want to pass all of the posts in. We only want to pass the paginated post in. So let's say, for example, if we had 6 posts and we wanted to make them paginate on every 2, we only want to send 2 posts at a time, and then we would divide the 6 posts by 3, which would give us 3 pages and 2 posts per page, as opposed to just returning all 6. So I'm going to rename this to post list, and now we actually have the list of all of our posts, but we still want to return our posts here, which is going to be a different variable that has access to more than just the default objects. So the way that we give this posts variable access to the broader spectrum of what's going on in the pagination is to actually create an instance of the pagination and make our posts variable that instance. And it is clever enough to work out to give us all of the functionality that we have within our post object, as well as everything that is attached to the paginator as well. So the way that we do that is by creating our posts variable. So we say posts is equal to, and now we need to create a new pagination instance. So I think the best way to do that is actually going to first be to create our paginator variable. So we say paginator is equal to, and then we create a class of paginator. And then we need to pass some variables into this in order to create it. So, or parameters into it. So the first parameter is that we pass into the paginator when we create a new instance of the paginator class is the object that we want to paginate, which in this case is our list of posts. So we will pull that in there. And then the second parameter that we want to pull in is the number of posts to paginate on. So I'm going to do 2 for this example. So that means that we're going to paginate every 2 posts. So that might be a bit difficult for us at this point because we only have 2 posts. So before I go and create more posts, I think for the sake of ease, I'm just going to make it paginate on 1, which means that we only ever see 1 post on every page, and we can paginate through posts 1 post at a time. Cool. So the next thing that we want to do is to make use of our request variable, which we've never done before. And the reason for this is because we want to fetch the get variable that would currently be sitting in the URL. So ideally, our posts our posts URL variable would look something like this. So let's say page is equal to 1, and then we can get the pagination result at page 1. And then when we click next or previous in our links, ideally that would go to page 2 and to page 3, or back to page 2 and back to page 1. And that's how a basic paginator works. And if you would like to share a specific page or paginated results with your friends online, you can copy the paginated variable in as well, and it will give you that exact page, which makes pagination very useful. So in that case, we are going to get the page variable. So the way we do that is we create a new variable called page, and then we can now call our request variable, which was pulled in as a parameter, into this. And now we choose what type of request we want to get. So our 2 options here really are get and post. So if you are familiar with how HTML get and post requests work, you will know that posts get sent within the browser header, and get variables get sent within the URL. So we want a URL variable because it is a lot easier to pass a URL variable when going between states, between different browsers, between different people, saving bookmarks, while a post variable is only maintained on the page's next refresh because it is passed into the header and is not something that we can see. So maybe just a little bit too much information on that subject. If you would like to find out more, you can always research get and post variables, or get and post HTML variables. Cool. So we want to run a function to get a specific get variable, and that'll be the get function. And the specific variable that we want to get is the page variable. So what this will now give us is where we said question mark page is equal to 1. This will now make our page variable here equal to 1. And if we had to change that to 2, this would now pass in 2. Cool. So now the next thing that we need to do is to, we have our page here, sorry. The next thing that we need to do is create something called a try except statement. So in PHP, it would be called a try catch statement. At the end of the day, an except clause and a catch clause is really the same thing. So the way that a try except statement works is we would write out the keyword try, and then again we put a colon, and then we run a line of code here, and then we would put as many except statements underneath that as we like, actually. And what that'll do is it will say, does this particular line match this exception that's given to us? If so, then run the exception underneath it. Otherwise, if it doesn't match it, then just try, just keep this as it is. So if it matches, and we can add multiple exceptions. If it matches any of these exceptions, then rather run that code as opposed to this try code here. So this is very useful for if we are trying to display useful errors to our users. So let's say this particular code here returned a 404 error or a 500 error or whatever the case is. Then in here we can, in a nice aesthetically pleasing way, we can send a message back to our user. So we aren't going to be using it for the sake of that at this point, but rather to set our posts variable. So what we're going to try is we're going to try and set our posts variable equal to, and now we are going to run a function on our newly created paginator object. So this is going to be paginator dot page, which is a function. And then what this does is it says, okay, cool, this is the list of posts that we want, which will eventually be passed into our template. And what we want to do is we want to get a specific page of those posts, bearing in mind that we only have one post per paginated result. So what this is going to do is this is actually going to return our paginated results. So we are going to try and see if we can get the paginated result at variable page, which will be the paginated result for 1 in this case. Lovely. And then we are going to write some exceptions to see if this doesn't pass for some reason, if this posts page doesn't, if it matches one of these exceptions, then we want to do something else. So the first exception is a special Django pagination exception called page not an integer. And basically what that does is that will get triggered if we put something in here that is not an integer, or if we put something in here that is not an integer. So if we had to call page is equal to some random gibberish. So that is a special Django pagination library, and we call it by saying page not, not an integer. And this is great because we can literally just pull this library straight into our view from the core paginator class. So we would just go page not an integer, pull that in, and then it will just match it against the function that's or the logic that is run here. So in this case, we just want to put our page variable in there. So now it's trying to get our page variable. In this case, if the page variable is not an integer, we want to set our posts to something else. And the thing that we want to set our posts to is the default paginated results that are returned, and that would be whatever is returned in page 1. So if page here is not an integer for some reason, we just want to return page 1, or the paginated results in page 1. Then the next exception that we want to create here to see if it matches against that, to see if the results that are returned don't have any page or don't have any posts in them, and that is called using the empty page class, and that is also passed in as a core Django paginator with core Django paginator functionality. So we just need to make sure we put our colons at the end here, and then what we want to do, if the result set that is returned is empty, basically meaning if what is returned here, we've run out of posts, I think the best thing to do there would be to load the last page that has results in it, because that is the closest to what we are looking for. So in that case, we are going to make posts. Again, we can just copy this line of code, and then what the paginator class has, which is really nice, is a static variable that can be called, which checks to see how many pages we have in our current paginated set of results, and that is the num pages. So this is really cool because we can return the last page by merely counting the number of pages. So let's say, for example, we know now that there are going to be 2 pages because it's one set of paginated results per page. So it's going to be page number 1, page number 2. So if we go to page number 2, we will get the last set of results. If we had 3 posts, obviously page 3 would be the last page that has results on them. So if we had to try run page number 4 here, so or in this example, page equal to 3, it would actually return pages equal to, and then the total number of paginated results, which would be 2, and it would return page number 2, which would give us test 2. Great. Just remembering that this 1 and 2 is just the post ID and doesn't coincide to the pagination at all. Lovely. So that was quite a lot to take in for one lecture. Let's run this manually and see if it works. I'm going to just refresh page 2 and let's see what happens. Fantastic. And now we have page 2 results being displayed. If we put 1 in here, we have page 1's results being displayed. Before I finish off the lecture, I just want to test these 2 exceptions to see what happens. So if we enter something that is not an integer, we want it to default to page 1. So let's say page is equal to something random. Great, it is now defaulting to page 1. And if we enter something that returns as an empty page, so I think page 0 may even work here. Yes, page 0 also would return an empty page. So page 2, which is the number of our pages set as the page variable here, would return there. And if we set this to something like page 5, the same thing would happen.